Today I'm going to talk about hypersensitivity or hypersensitive reaction. And as you know, so far there are 4 types of hypersensitivity from type 1 to type 4. However, an emerged type 5 which was not agreed on. And now we are going to talk about these types. Type 1, we call it immediate hypersensitive reaction or immediate hypersensitivity. And the classical example is allergic, bronchial, asthma. And as you know that mast cells, these superficial cells, they express receptors specific for IgE antibodies. In normal individuals, only 20% of these receptors are occupied by IgE antibodies. But however, in allergic individuals, almost 95% of these receptors are occupied by antibodies. So binding of antibodies to the receptors will lead to cross-linking, or the cross-linking of the bound antibodies will lead or will send 2 signals. Signal 1 to the vesicles which contain granules, and cross-linking of antibodies will lead to degranulation, so that the granules will come out. They are histamine, neutrophil chemoatractant factor, esinophil chemoatractant factor, platelet activating factor. And as you know that histamine increases capillary permeability and induces vasodilation, and neutrophil chemoatractant factor will attract neutrophils. Esinophil chemoatractant factor will attract esinophils. The second signal is that from the wall. The wall contains arachidonic acid, and through two pathways, this arachidonic acid will give rise to leukotrienes and prostaglandin. Leukotrienes and prostaglandin, both they cause bronchspasm. So in case with allergic bronchial asthma, and in case of hypersensitive reaction type 1, the patient usually suffer from inflammation due to histamine and influx of cells and bronchospasm. And this, we call it hypersensitive reaction type 1. Hypersensitive reaction type 2, we call it antibody mediated. And the classical example is rheumatic heart disease or fever. In some children with recurrent tonsillitis, their immune system and their body will mount or produce antibodies against streptococci pyogenes. And this is a good part of the story, because streptococci will eradicate the antibodies will eradicate the streptococci. But however, the bad part of the story that these antibodies will cross-react and bind to the heart, because there is a molecular mimicry or similarity between some proteins on the wall of the streptococci and protein on the wall of the heart. So here the antigen on the wall of the heart is a membrane bound. It is not free antigen. So binding of antibodies to the antigens on the wall of the heart will lead to activation of the classical pathway of the complement, and this will lead to formation of anaphylaxis and membrane attack, which lead to inflammation. In case of heart, we call it carditis, and may end in heart failure. The third type of hypersensitive reaction or hypersensitivity is immune complex mediated. And the difference between type 3 and type 4 is that between type 3 and type 2 is that in type 2 the antigen is membrane bound. But in case of type 3, the antigen is free. So the antigen and the antibody, they are circulating. But in case of type 2, antigens and antibodies, they are not circulating. The example of type 3 is systemic lupus erythematosus. In case of systemic lupus erythematosus, the immune complexes or the free immune complexes will circulate and may reside in the heart. This will lead to carditis. May reside in the lung. This will lead to pleurisy. May reside in knee. This will lead to arthralgia or arthritis. Or if they get resided in the brain, they will lead to depression. So the difference between type 3 and type 2 is that in type 3, the immune complex is circulating. The fourth type of hypersensitive reaction is, we call it delayed, and the classical example is the granuloma formation. And as you know, in case if someone get exposed to infection by Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacteria, these bacteria will be engulfed by pulmonary macrophages. They are processed and they are expressed on the surface of these macrophages in association with major histocompatibility class 2. And here type T helper 1 will recognize the antigens derived from the Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacteria, and T helper 1, according to this recognition, will get activated and produce cytokine known as interferon gamma. This interferon gamma will recruit more macrophages to the area, and these macrophages will build a wall, and the activated macrophages will produce a cytokine known as tumor necrosis factor alpha, and this tumor necrosis factor alpha will lead to a liquefaction here with subsequent formation of a caseous material. Some of the macrophages will transform into epithelioid cells, and these epithelioid cells will produce vitamin D, which is very important for healing of the lesion, because vitamin D enhances calcification, and thus the healing in such case is by calcification and not by fibrosis. Some of the macrophage also will change to giant cells, and these giant cells play a very crucial role in arresting intractable bacilli. So hypersensitive reactions from type 1 to type 4, we agreed on them. But however, no consensus on type 5, which was proposed by Ivan Royd. And Ivan Royd proposed that type 5, it could be either inhibitory or stimulatory. Stimulatory means antibodies may stimulate the thyroid gland and lead to overproduction of thyroxine. And inhibitory in case of myasthenia gravis, here the antibodies will interfere with production of acetylcholine as they occupy the acetylcholine receptor. Thank you very much.